Hello everyone. Thank you for joining us today for another episode of Michael On. As you know, Michael's very good at encapsulating information and putting it in easy to understand terms. So he's here today and he's going to talk about robots in the future. So why is this a topic that fascinates you, Michael?
I've always been interested in robots and the future of where technology is going. And I think that's pretty common. I think a lot of people are. There's people who get into Lego and building robots and all that kind of thing. So I think I've always been interested in the way that they can enhance our lives and make them, so easier, more convenient, and the way that they'll change our lifestyle going into the future. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So robots are here to make our lives easier.
Well, supposedly, yeah. They are, I think, they're going to be good and bad for some people. Obviously, there's some new advances in robotics. You could even call electric cars or new kinds of cars. There are new kinds of robots, and those are going to be taking some people's jobs. So, I mean, for some people it'll be good. For some people, maybe not so good. But I think overall, the consensus is that probably there'll be a positive influence on our lives.
You talked about robots as being cars. Can you expand on that?
Well, yeah, because basically what's happening with especially electric cars, but I guess it could be also done with internal combustion engine cars, is that they're making them autonomous, which means they can drive themselves. So they use AI, artificial intelligence, to sort of see what's on the road, and then they can, decide whether to turn left or right or speed up or slow down. And making those kinds of decisions basically turns that car into an autonomous system. It's basically a robot that can handle itself. And what effect this has is that basically people are going to be able to, get into your car, you sit down, you tell the car where to go, and it's going to take you, there, and you can fall asleep in the back of the car, whatever you want to do, read a book. And so that is going to be sort of taking the place of not just people who work as drivers, but everybody who drives. So.
Yeah, so we won't need to take driving tests.
Yeah, that's always a sticking point for a lot of people. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. So what are people going to do if their jobs are taken by robots?
They have to find new jobs, basically. I mean, that's always been the way with technology. Whenever something new comes along that can replace what a human does, then those humans, those people, they have to find something new that they can do. So during the Industrial Revolution, when there was the oncoming of factories, I mean, there were a lot of people that worked in factories and making things and things like that, and they did a lot of things by hand. And then those factories became increasingly automatized, and there were machines that were taking over people's jobs, like in the textile industry and making clothes and other objects and things like that. So basically, those people who had been making things by hand, they had to learn to do something else. So it was a tough transition time. And the thing about this time is that it's going to be even faster. Things are changing really, really fast. I think a lot of people don't understand how fast this change is coming. Maybe 5 years ago, most people didn't even think about electric cars or automatic driving cars or that kind of thing. But now they're pretty much a reality, and I'd say in 5 to 10 years they're going to be taking over the majority of the driving in the streets. Because ultimately automatic driving is supposed to be safer. Because as we're humans, we have human reflexes and we react more slowly than a computer can. And so basically that means that if you have a computer responsible for driving the car, it can make decisions much more quickly than we can. And there are sensors on the car that can sort of sense things further ahead than what our normal eyes can. So basically, the car can react more quickly and more safely than most humans can. Okay. So that would mean, there might even be a point where lawmakers would realize that this is saving a lot of people's lives. And then they might even turn it into law that you can no longer drive cars because it's more dangerous than letting a computer do it.
Right.
Yeah.
What other kinds of robots are out there that will enhance our future?
Right now, it's starting now in things in the home, like I guess a lot of people have heard of the Roomba, which is sort of an automatic vacuum cleaner, that kind of thing. Now there's the things like HomePods, like the Alexa and the Google HomePod, I think it's called, and things like that, which is basically a speaker. Some of them have a screen, and what they do is that you can ask it questions, and then it can perform certain functions like giving you information or connecting you to sort of a YouTube video or something like that, where you can get a recipe or get instructions on how to do something. And so this is becoming sort of like an assistant in the home. This is the beginning of it, and I think probably that's going to start evolving to something that's more mobile. In fact, some of them do exist where it's a mobile version of that. It rolls around the house. And then, from there it would be an incremental thing where it would be able to carry something maybe for you. You could put your cup, after you drank something, you put your cup on it, it would carry it to the kitchen. And it's sort of a step-by-step iterative kind of thing where it would get to the point where it's basically like a small little robot in your house giving you help whenever you need it. So that's coming, I'd say, in the next 10 years, maybe 10, 15 years, when people become more comfortable with it. So, yeah.
And so there's robots in the house. Are there robots in any other kind of application, areas of our lives? Or?
Yeah, it's going to be everywhere. I mean, what's happening is that there's a convergence of technology. So you've got artificial intelligence, which is allowing robots to do things more effectively and in a much smaller space or much smaller body. So one example is what DARPA has come up with. It's defense. I can't remember the acronym, but it was originally started by the Defense Department in the U.S. and it was their objective was to create a robot that could perform certain functions, and that's kind of evolved over time. What they've done to this point is created a robot that basically can walk and move around and even jump and do flips and things like that. There was a competition a few years ago where they wanted the robot to perform certain functions that would be done in a factory, because there was a huge disaster in Fukushima a few years ago, and they decided to make robots able to perform those functions because of during the Fukushima disaster, the nuclear waste made it impossible. The radiation made it impossible for humans to go in there. So they were looking at robots that could turn off valves and open doors and change things on a control panel and things like that. And so they had a competition, and towards the end they were able to get these robots to sort of cut a hole in a wall and open a door and drive a little buggy thing, and it was pretty amazing actually in just a few years. So if that trend continues, then you're going to have robots that are able to do all kinds of things in factories, and even home care, those kinds of things, like helping elderly people. That's a big thing in Japan now because they have an aging population. So there's going to be all these robots that are in the home and outside the home, in the workplace, on the streets, and I think it's going to happen a lot faster than people realize.
I saw a video recently of a robot cooking in the kitchen.
Sure. Yeah. They have them in restaurants now. There's a pizza maker one.
Yeah.
There's even one that's kind of trainable. So what they do is they start it off in a sort of a neutral position, then they start the program, they just click a button, and then they say, okay, move this hand here, grab this, move it over there, open this, close that, and it's got a series of programs. And then it just basically, they activate it, and then it just does that.
Yeah.
So they train it literally by moving the arms around.
Yeah.
So it's very, very accessible to anybody who's in a workplace.
Right.
They don't need to know programming or anything. So,
Right.
And that's happening in restaurants already today. So.
And how do you think I'm thinking about our children and how robots are going to affect our children's lives? Like, is the education that our children having now, is that preparing them for a future with robots?
Not really. I don't think so. I think that the education that they'll get for robotics and other kinds of technologies, it happens outside schools, really.
Yeah.
I've noticed, because I'm a teacher, and I've noticed that a lot of the education system is focused on sort of the traditional things, like English and grammar and basic mathematics and things like that. But it doesn't really focus that much, at least in my experience, on sort of the newer technologies like coding and computer knowledge and even robotics and things like that. There are courses that you can take, but you have, the parents have to kind of purposely get their kid involved in that. It's not part of the core
Right.
education. And so I think that for our kids, it's going to be learning outside of the school environment. So they have to, like go on YouTube or learn things from books and things like that. Maybe even take courses, specially designed courses. And I think you're talking about that far in the future. The general trend of what's happening in the future is that things are going to get more powerful and smaller. So they're going to be able to fit into a lot more spaces and do a lot more things. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. That's
Sure.
given us a lot to think about.
Yeah. It's a big subject.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you have any comments or suggestions about our videos, please leave them below in the comments section, and we look forward to hearing from you. See you next time.
See ya. Bye.
Bye-bye.